there's a topic I want to talk about. I have it.
Yeah.
And then you said jazz.
Yeah.
Do you even remember why I'm here? Like, what is she doing here?
No.
Why is there?
I remember. It's just
like talk down what someone's learned or put down any dance schools or teachers or anything like that. That said, I had some great jazz dance teachers, and I don't know that I learned the things that we're about to talk about. So can we start with what is jazz dance? What do we think jazz dance is, and what is jazz dance?
That's a loaded question.
Damn it. What is jazz dance?
But I will say this.
Wait,
so,
I have another way I could ask it.
Go.
So, okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I always wondered why jazz dance wasn't done to actual jazz music.
I wondered that myself.
And I'm not going to use any more disclaimers. Yeah, so I was just wondering about that I don't think one jazz dance I did growing up was to a jazz song. And then I thought...
That's sad.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know.
But they probably didn't know. The teachers probably did not know.
Yeah.
Jazz dance. You depending on who you ask and what their background is, you may hear a myriad of answers. However, for me, someone who grew up an infant listening to jazz music, father who played 5 different instruments, I was surrounded by jazz music and classical music. I was taught the authentic, and I hate that jazz has to be encumbered by words like authentic or vernacular, but I was taught real jazz dancing growing up. Jazz dance is tap, which comes before jazz. It comes before the music even existed. Tap was already a thing. But as tap's growing and developing, and then jazz comes into the play, the music comes into the play, the music comes into the space. Tap was still such a prevalent dance in America that after ragtime music, jazz comes in. Tap is still one of the primary dance structures that people are doing. Tap influences what we call soft shoe or non-tapping, right, movement. So there were movements that were a tap step, but you could do the same step without taps on. And vice versa. You know, a dance that would come up with influence and tappers would find a way to do that and, add the tap. So it's tap. Next is Lindy Hop. Not really next, but solo dances. What we call solo dances, similar to hip-hop. And hip-hop, whether you're talking 80s to now, you have solo, if you will, dances like the Tone Wop or the Millie Rock or the Running Man or the Roger Rabbit. In the jazz era, you had the same thing. You had almost 20-something different Charleston steps. You had dances like you saw me do today, the Black Bottom. You had trucking, you had pecking, you had the Susie Q, you had a number of individual dances that people did to jazz music. And then you had Lindy Hop. Those are the primary 3. But then you also had exotic dancing, or what some people might call burlesque dancing. It was referred to as exotic dancing in the 30s and the 40s. You had eccentric dancing.
What I do at 7 p.m. in my house when I'm with my boss. Bad joke.
Well, eccentric dancing had some specificity to it as well, because under the title for the jazz era, under the title eccentric dancing, which if you date back, it was considered grotesque, was a word that was used. However, it was changed to eccentric dancing. Under that, you have things like rubbernecking, rubber leg, and Legomania was the primary 3. Then you had a lot of tricks, things that people would do that looked like breaking. Spinning on one hand, what breakers called 90s or 2000s, spinning on your head, turtles, butt spins, windmills. They did all that in the early 20th century. And all of that was under eccentric dance. And a lot of that stuff was, the eccentric dance stuff was usually tethered to comedians or anyone who did some type of comedic, fall down slapstick kind of comedy. The movement was something other than, dance, something that kind of thrust you in the spotlight. So there was even a book that came out in 1921 by a comedian named Lupino Lane. It's illustrated by Cecil Orr. I have the book, but I don't have it in my office. And in the book, this is 1921, in the book, it explains and through Cecil Orr illustrates how to do a 108-degree flip, which breakers call a suicide. Mm-hmm. It explains how to do spin around the head, which is a head spin. And it talks about Lupino Lane saying he's seen these different people and they did 3 pirouettes on their head. They had 3 head spins.
Did some of that go also into locking?
No.
Okay.
Not that.
Not the head spins.
The jazz stuff did go into locking. I mean, in terms of locking, since you brought it up, I'll just say, in terms of, so you're talking about movement, you're talking about dress, you're talking about, in any kind of dance, you're talking about, and I might have mentioned this with hip-hop, because it doesn't matter, the genre of movement, you are still talking about social, political, economical, environmental, and in many cases, spiritual practice of one's lived experience around, and in the gestures and how we communicate. Those things, gestures become dances. What informs the dance is based on those 5 things, right? Social, political, economical, environmental, spiritual. That's what informs it, but the dance comes out of the gestures. But when you're the dance is done because of the music. House music, house dance. Hip-hop music, hip-hop dancing. Jazz music, jazz dancing. This proscenium thing comes from the influence jazz had on these people who came later. So all your so-called jazz greats, Frank Hatchett, Gus Giordano, Fosse, Luigi, all these people, they were born in between 1921, I think Hatchett was the last one. I think Hatchett was born in 35. They become the prominent figures with this concert world in jazz dance, inspired by jazz dance. We got to think they were babies. And so they come to prominence in the 50s, 60s. But the jazz was hitting from 1910 to the 50s with tap, with Lindy Hop, with all the solo stuff. And you don't really learn it. You learn the influence, but you may or you may not know where that step came from that you just learned in Hatchett's class or in Giordano's class or Fosse. And then the legacy is that. So then the African-American community where the dancers are coming out of, there's no legacy there. We don't know these people. We don't know the Whitey's. We don't know the Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. We don't know Frank Manning. We don't know Norma Miller. We don't know, Willa Mae Ricker. We don't know any of them. We don't know about Mabel Lee. We don't know about Dawn Hampton. We don't know about Leroy Stretch Jones. We don't know about any of these people. We know about these other cats. I'm like, that ain't jazz dancing. It's jazz influenced. I wouldn't call it jazz dancing. And so that's what I talk about, like this difference of this is what came first. This came out of the community. It influenced these groups of people. They went on to become prominent figures, but then we're not learning this. We're not learning what the root is. And to me, that's an issue. I think people should learn both. And it's really it entering the commodity system is what fuels why you do it. Because now you get jobs. You want to do Broadway, then you got to learn this stuff that Fosse and them created. You're not going to get Broadway doing Lindy Hop or doing all. It becomes the reason for learning these forms is because the position that put those people in. But I'm like, that's not. Stop calling that jazz dancing. That ain't jazz dancing.